North Korea. Um, I don't know. I was going to call it the Florida of the world, but even Florida sometimes is not as crazy or as insane as, or even as dangerous as North Korea. But one of the things that got unnoticed last year was that North Korea stepped up massively its missile launches. It launched last year roughly, I think it was about 82 missiles last year. Now, normally when North Korea launches a missile, oh, it's big news. We all talk about it. We all say, "Oh my god, what's what's Rocket Man up to now?" Um, in a way, North Korea has sort of been ignored. But what I think, honestly, is going on at the moment is that North Korea is very clearly, should we say, getting its horses in a row. It is now on the path that if it wants to survive, it has to be more closely aligned with China and more closely aligned with Russia, because at the moment, North Korea is supplying Russia with a lot of long range missiles and artillery shells. And, well, we've seen the videos of Russian soldiers complaining about the quality of this artillery and the fact that, these artillery shells aren't, so we say, properly made, because when you want to fire an artillery shell, you've got to make sure that the exact same propellant is the exact same for all your artillery shells. Otherwise, your shells are going to go long, they're going to go short, and the accuracy of your artillery barrages ain't going to be as effective. And we have seen that time and time again being reported by the Ukrainians being, well, shelled by Russians and their artillery falling either far short or even, in some cases, on their own troops. But that's just, that's just Russia being Russia. But Kim Jong-un came out very recently and said that unification with South Korea is no longer possible, because for the past, what, 10 years or so, there has been sort of moves, especially by the pro-peace parties in South Korea, to try and encourage some form of unification, of making sure that the tensions between these countries are sort of lessened, that they can work together more. But of course, that hasn't really happened. When they've said, "Oh, hey, North Korean workers can come and work in, South Korean factories." Well, these North Korean workers have all of a sudden seen, "Oh my word, this is South Korea. This is nothing like, the propaganda I've realized." And of course, well, they start defecting en masse. Needless to say, that ended very, very quickly by North Korea. And even in some cases where South Korean people were allowed to go to do jobs and etc. In North Korea, sometimes, shall we say, they might have a bit longer stay than they had potentially expected, because the government goes, "Hold on, we're going to kidnap you for a brief period of time so that we can essentially steal your knowledge." This, yeah. So obviously, very quickly, that was put a stop to very, very quickly by the South Koreans. So, but there have been other things that they have tried to do in order to try and sort of de-escalate tensions and sort of get the more two countries sort of working closely together. However, this has now been put to bed completely, because now constitutionally North Korea has changed its constitution to unilaterally say South Korea is now our biggest threat. And this sparks a worry. This sparks a very big worry, because you've got everything that's going on in Ukraine. You've got the potentiality that we've just had an excellent Taiwan, where China got very annoyed that world leaders were calling up, the Taiwanese president, saying congratulations. They've even launched an official complaint against the Australian Prime Minister for daring to suggest that that Taiwan was a country. But of course, that could be a problem. And there is talks about now of what if China did go after Taiwan. And now I know we've all seen the report about the military readiness and the capabilities of China. Yes, I know, highly hilarious. Yet another meant to be at least peer to America seems to have even worse problems than than the Russian military when it comes to its own corruption. Again, um, there you go. But there are, of course, concerns that what if China went to war against Taiwan, would at that point North Korea see its own opportunity to go, we are going to go to war with South Korea as well? Because remember, there has never been a peace agreement signed between these two countries. They are just in a state of sort of perpetual ceasefire. So that again, as you said, is a worry. It is a very, very big worry. And uh, again, the only country that can really control North Korea is China, because it will go, hey, knock it off, or else no more supplies for you. But now North Korea is getting a lot of money and making a lot of money from supplying Russia with weaponry. Um, it doesn't have to potentially to as listen as much to China as it used to, which obviously has led to it, saying things like this of, Kim Jong-un coming out, well, now, South Korea is like our biggest enemy. We've got to, be wary of the South Koreans. We can't trust these evil people anymore. In fact, this is what he had to say. So this is what he said very recently in a speech. He said, "We do not want war, but we have no intention of avoiding it." And he has closed down three um, agencies that were part of this movement to sort of have reconciliation and eventually reunification. So he's closed down um, the Inter-Korean Tourism Agency, the Committee for Peaceful Reunification, and the National Economic Cooperation Bureau. And of course, the Mount Kumang International Tourism Administration. So these are all things that were, helping to sort of provide maybe a more peaceful solution, a more peaceful sort of reintegration. Maybe there could be a reunification of these two countries, although given the Kim regime and its absolute control of power, it's very doubtful how much they wanted to, shall we say, have given that up in terms of, shall we say, a democracy. Um, yeah, very worrying, and it only gets worse. It only gets worse because he also went on to this. He said, Kim said that a war would, quote, decimate South Korea and would deal an unimaginable defeat to its biggest ally, the US, which currently has about 30,000 troops stationed in the country. So remember, those troops that are stationed there, they are a roadblock. Essentially, they are, but just a stumbling block, because the South Korean, well, the North Korean army, um, is basically just to descend upon South Korea in a massive artillery barrage, followed by an absolute human wave of AK carrying fanatics, essentially, who are then going to just go and descend into South Korea and commit all kinds of horrific acts. Um, yeah, it's not going to be very good, should we say. But he also went on to say this. He said, in the event of war on the Korean Peninsula, I think it is also important to reflect on the issue of completely occupying, suppressing, and reclaiming South Korea and incorporating it into the territory of our republic, Kim said. So there you have Kim Jong un basically saying, um, we are going to occupy, we are going to kill all dissenters and suppress them and reorganize them into our own republic of a united Korea. Now, let me just reiterate that. That is incredibly worrying for any South Korean. Uh, They have been long, long living under democracy. They are used to democratic norms. They're used to having sort of freedom of speech. Everything that living under the regime of North Korea would absolutely deny them. They would be exposed to mass famines that we know that go on in North Korea, um, all kinds of horrific, re-education camps. You've seen people who have been to North Korea. You've seen the very bizarre things that they have put forward. That is what Kim has basically opened and said it wants to do on this. Um, it's very worrying. It's really worrying because now you've got the former State Department from North Korea who said that this as well. Siegfried Heckler, who said this: "It is now more dangerous than it has been any time since June of 1950, shortly before the start of the Korean War. That may sound overly dramatic, but we believe that, like his grandfather, Kim Il Sung in 1950, Kim Jong-un has made a strategic decision to go to war. We do not know when or how Kim plans to pull the trigger, but the danger is already far beyond the routine warnings in Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo about Pyongyang's provocations." So there is a real mounting concern now that Kim Jong un might have seriously decided to go to war and to completely occupy, suppress, and integrate South Korea. And that is going to lead to all kinds of horrific outcomes. And it is something we should consider about what happens. Do we then go and get involved in a Korean war to defend the liberty, democracy, and the freedoms of the South Korean people? Because that is the option that is there. And that at that point, maybe China gets involved on the side of North Korea. Maybe also Russia gets involved on the side of North Korea. I know I'm sometimes a bit of a Debbie Downer when I talk about what world and geopolitics, but sometimes you've got to talk about the bad stuff before you can talk about the good stuff. Yeah, needless to say, this very, very worrying indeed. Um, very worrying, to say the least. So we'll see what happens, but we have to keep an eye more on North Korea, and I think we have to take their threats very, very seriously because Kim Jong Un may have seriously decided, you know what, now is the time for reunification. Forget this peaceful reintegration stuff. We're just going to go and take the South. That's the worry. That could cause a whole mess of problems. And just like the Ukrainians defending their freedom and their democracy and their liberties as well, do we also say that we are going to do the same for South Korea as well? So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all the people who do help support the channel. And of course, we'll see you all next time.